Welcome back to the deep dive. We are doing something a little bit different today.
We definitely are.
Yeah, because usually, when we talk about high-level engineering or structural integrity on this show, we're looking at things like suspension bridges.
Right. We're skyscrapers.
Exactly, skyscrapers, or maybe the chassis of a Formula One car.
Hmm.
But today, we are looking at a masterpiece of engineering that you are literally carrying around with you right now.
It really is the ultimate personal device. And honestly, it is arguably the most sophisticated piece of armor plating in the natural world.
We are talking about the human skull. And I have to be honest, when I first saw this topic come up in the stack, my brain it immediately went to the usual associations.
The spooky stuff.
Right. You think
Huh.
of Halloween. You think of Hamlet holding the skull of Yorick.
Pirate's flag.
Exactly. We are so conditioned to see the skull as a symbol of death. But digging into this source material, this incredibly detailed anatomical survey we have for today's deep dive, I'm realizing that is just completely backward.
It really is. It's funny how culture does that.
Yeah, the skull isn't a symbol of death at all. It is this vibrant, dynamic, biological puzzle box. It's a fortress designed to protect the most complex object in the known universe.
Which is your brain.
Right, your brain. And what blew my mind right off the bat is that it's not just one thing. It's not a single bone.
Oh, that is the biggest misconception out there. I think most people picture the skull like a porcelain bowl or maybe a bowling ball.
Yeah, just one continuous sphere of bone with some holes punched out for the eyes.
Exactly. But when you actually look at the anatomy, which is what we are going to do today, you realize it is a serious construction project. It is 22 separate bones.
22.
22 distinct bones, all locked together in this intricate 3D jigsaw puzzle. And that's actually excluding the tiny little ossicles inside the ear.
Which are a whole other story.
Oh, entirely.
Yeah.
We're just talking about the main chassis today. 22 plates, wedges, and arches, all fitted together with these rigid joints called sutures.
So, here is our mission for this deep dive. We are going to mentally and physically construct the skull. We want to take you, the listener, on a tour from the top of the dome all the way down to the jaw, and then underneath to the complex plumbing of the base.
I love this approach.
And because this is audio, we have a really unique opportunity here. We want you to play along.
Yes, please do. It makes it so much more real.
Unless you are driving a car or operating heavy machinery where you need both hands, I want you to actually reach up and feel these landmarks on your own head as we describe them. It turns this from just a passive listen into a tactile workshop.
That is absolutely the best way to learn anatomy. You have the specimen right there with you.
Exactly. So before we start snapping these 22 pieces together, we need to define the territory. The source material breaks the skull down into two main subdivisions. And I have to say, the names sound like something straight out of a sci-fi novel.
They really do.
We have the neurocranium and the viscerocranium.
They do sound a bit intense, don't they? But the Latin roots are actually super helpful here. They tell you exactly what the function is. So the neurocranium is exactly what it sounds like. It's a cranial skeleton for the neuro part of you. This is the brain box.
So this is the vault itself?
Correct. Its primary job, and really its only job, is to form a protective case for the brain and the meninges.
The meninges being
The membranes that cover the brain, right. It's the helmet. And that helmet isn't just one piece. It's made of 8 specific bones.
Okay, let's list those out.
You have the frontal bone, the 2 parietal bones, the 2 temporal bones, the occipital bone, the sphenoid, and the ethmoid.
Okay, so that is the brain box, 8 bones. And then the second zone was the viscerocranium.
Right. Now, viscera refers to the viscera, the organs, or the soft kits. This is the facial skeleton. This is the anterior or front part of the skull.
The face.
Exactly. This is the part that handles your interface with the world.
The interface. I really like that framing.
It's very accurate. It houses your senses, sight, smell, taste. It handles the intake of fuel, so eating. It handles the intake of oxygen, breathing. And socially, it determines what you look like. It is the physical scaffolding for your identity.
And that accounts for the other 14 bones.
Correct. That includes the mandible, the vomer, the maxillae, the zygomatics.
That's for your cheekbones, right?
Yes, the cheekbones. Plus the nasal bones and a few smaller, delicate ones tucked deep inside, like the lacrimal and palatine bones.
So brain box in the back, face machinery in the front. 8 plus 14 equals our 22.
You've got the math perfectly.
Now, before we start looking at the specific views, I want to pause on function for a second because the source material makes it clear that nature is stingy. It doesn't build ridges or holes or thick spots just for decoration. Every single bump we are going to ask you to feel today is there for a reason.
Absolutely. In anatomy, there is a golden rule. Form follows function.
Yeah.
The skull has a surprisingly heavy workload. First and foremost is protection. We often forget that the brain is incredibly soft. It's not like a muscle. It's highly gelatinous. It has the consistency of soft tofu or custard.
Wow, that is actually a terrifying thought.
It really is.
Yeah.
If you didn't have this hard casing, you wouldn't survive 5 minutes in the physical world. Gravity alone would be a huge problem. So the neurocranium is the original crash helmet.
But it's not just a dumb bucket either. It's a sensory housing unit.
Right. Think about your eyes. They are delicate spheres of fluid. You need a rigid cavity, the orbit, to make sure they don't get squashed every time you bump into something.
That makes sense.
You need an echo chamber for your hearing. You need a filtration system for your smell. The skull provides these rigid spaces so the soft tissues can actually do their work undisturbed.
And then there's the sheer mechanical force of eating. I remember reading somewhere that the human jaw can exert a massive amount of pressure.
Oh, immense pressure. That's mastication. The skull has to be incredibly strong to withstand the force of your jaw muscles clamping down. If your skull were soft or pliable, chewing a tough piece of steak would literally warp your entire head.
Which would be visually disturbing.
Highly disturbing. The skull acts as a rigid frame to absorb and distribute those forces so your brain doesn't get rattled every single time you eat dinner.
Okay, one more concept before we start the physical tour. I kept seeing this term in the notes, the Frankfurt plane. It sounds like a flight itinerary or maybe a post-war treaty, but I gather it's about how we hold our heads.
Yes, this is a crucial concept for anthropologists and doctors. Imagine you dig up a skull. How do you hold it to study it? Do you tilt it back? Do you tilt it forward?
I guess you just lay it on a table.
But depending on how it rests, the face looks completely different. The jaw might look like it protrudes a lot, or maybe less.
So they needed a standard baseline.
Exactly. We needed a 0 point for human measurement. So in 1884, anthropologists got together and agreed on the Frankfurt plane. It is the standard anatomical position for the skull.
How do we visualize that?
Imagine a perfectly horizontal line passing through the lower margin of your eye socket, the orbit, and the upper margin of your ear hole, the external acoustic meatus.
Okay, let me try this. Listener, try this with me. If I draw an imaginary line from the bony bottom of my eye socket straight back to the top of my ear hole, that line should be exactly parallel to the floor.
Precisely. When that line is horizontal, your skull is officially in the Frankfurt plane. That is the standard reference position.
Got it.
So, as we describe these different views today, imagine the skull is sitting on a table, perfectly level, calibrated to this Frankfurt plane.
Okay, we are calibrated. Let's begin the construction. We are going to use the medical terms for the views, which the source material calls normae, and we are going to start with the view from above, the drone shot basically, the norma verticalis.
The norma verticalis. If you are standing directly over someone sitting in a chair and looking down at the top of their head, this is what you see. It is essentially oval-shaped. But it's not a perfect oval. It's usually wider at the back than it is at the front.
And looking at this landscape, we are primarily seeing 3 big plates of bone, right?
Correct. Anteriorly, so at the front, you have the frontal bone. That's your forehead curving back. Then, making up the vast bulk of the roof and the sides, you have the paired parietal bones, one on the left, one on the right.
And the third.
At the very back, just sort of peeking into view from the top, is the occipital bone.
Now, this is where the puzzle box aspect really shines. Because these bones aren't fused into a smooth sheet like a molded plastic helmet. They are stitched together.
Yes, the sutures. These are fibrous joints. In an adult, they are completely immobile, but they look like zippers or jagged cracks running across the bone. And jagged is really the key word here. They aren't straight lines.
Right, I was looking at the diagrams in the source material. They look almost like complex coastlines on a map.
That is a brilliant analogy. They interlock. The bone from one side actually grows tiny fingers that fit into the notches of the bone on the other side.
Like woodworking.
Exactly like dovetail joinery and woodworking, but on a microscopic biological level. It increases the surface area of the joint and makes it incredibly strong.
Let's trace them. Listeners, try to trace these on your own head. You might not feel the actual seam unless you have very short hair or are very sensitive to it, but you can find the general location. The first one runs from ear to ear, basically, across the top of the head.
That is the coronal suture. It separates the single frontal bone from the two parietal bones behind it. Think of it like a headband or a tiara, a corona. That's why it's called coronal. It cuts the skull into a front half and a back half.
And then there's one running right down the center line, like the painted stripe on a highway.
That is the sagittal suture. It connects the two parietal bones together. Sagittal comes from the Latin word for arrow. Imagine an arrow shot straight down the midline of the skull. This defines the left and right sides of your body.
And then at the back, there is a shape that looks like a triangle.
The lambdoid suture. It looks exactly like the Greek letter lambda, an upside-down Y or a triangle. This connects the parietal bones to the occipital bone at the back.
So we have these three main zippers crossing the top of the skull, and where they meet, we have these very specific landmarks. The source material highlights a spot called bregma.
The bregma is a really fascinating spot. It's the junction point where the coronal suture meets the sagittal suture. So right in the top front of your head.
If I'm tracing the center line from my nose up, it's where I hit the top of the curve.
Roughly, yes. If you were ever around a newborn baby, you know the soft spot.
Oh, the fontanelle.
Exactly, the anterior fontanelle.
Huh.
That soft spot exists because at birth, the skull bones aren't fused yet. They need to be able to slide over each other a bit so the baby's head can actually fit through the birth canal.
It's a collapsible helmet.
It is. And over the first 18 months of life, that membrane slowly turns to bone. In an adult, that ossified spot is the bregma.
So if you tap the top of your head right now, just slightly forward of the very center, you are essentially tapping the ghost of your own soft spot.
That's a very poetic way to put it.
Yes, you are.
And if you follow the sagittal suture back to where it hits the lambdoid suture, that junction is called, appropriately, lambda. That was the posterior fontanelle in the baby, which closes much earlier.
There are a couple of other points on this top view, Mac. We have the vertex.
The vertex is simply the highest point of the skull when it's in that Frankfurt plane we talked about. It's the absolute peak of the mountain. It usually sits right on the sagittal suture, somewhere near the middle.
And then there's something called the parietal eminence.
This is very important for the overall shape of the head. The parietal bones are curved plates. The parietal eminence is the area of maximum convexity. It's the bump on the side of the roof.
Why does that matter structurally?
Structural protection. If you drop a skull, or more realistically, if you fall and hit your head on the ground, this eminence is most likely where the impact will happen.
It acts like a bumper.
Exactly. It absorbs the shock. So the force doesn't go straight to the thinner, fracture-prone areas. It spreads the kinetic energy out.
And finally, for this view, a tiny detail that the source mentions, the parietal foramen.
Yes. A foramen is just a fancy anatomical word for a hole. The parietal foramen is a tiny pinprick in the parietal bone, usually near the sagittal suture towards the back. It transmits an emissary vein.
An emissary vein, what is that?
These are really cool. They are veins that connect the scalp veins outside the skull to the venous sinuses inside the skull, sitting right on top of the brain. They act like pressure relief valves.
Oh, wow.
If the pressure inside the skull gets too high, blood can flow out. Or if the scalp is hot, it can help cool the blood.
But I imagine that's a two-way street.
It is, and that is exactly the danger. If you have a severe infection on your scalp, it can theoretically travel through that tiny hole and infect the meninges of the brain. Historically, before antibiotics, that was a very dangerous route for sepsis.
It's amazing. Even a tiny pinhole in the armor has a life or death implication. Okay, let's move the camera. We are leaving the top view and dropping down to look the skull right in the eyes. This is the norma frontalis, the view from the front.
This is the view that truly defines human identity. The face.
So we're looking at the forehead, the eye sockets, the cheeks, and the jaws. Let's start at the top and work our way down. The forehead.
The frontal region. This is formed by the squamous part of the frontal bone. Squamous just means scale-like or flat. It's the vertical plate that protects the frontal lobes of your brain.
The part of you that does the thinking and planning.
The executive function, yes.
And there are landmarks here that I know everyone listening can feel right now. Listener, take your finger and run it over your eyebrow. You feel that hard, bony ridge underneath.
Those are the superciliary arches. Cilia refers to eyelashes or hairs. These are the heavy ridges that support the eyebrows.
Mine feel pretty prominent.
They vary a lot from person to person. They're actually part of the sexual dimorphism of the skull. Generally speaking, males have much more prominent superciliary arches than females. It's one of the very first things a forensic anthropologist looks at to determine the sex of a skull.
And then right between the eyebrows, just above the nose, there's a smooth, slightly elevated spot. I love the name of this feature.
The glabella. It comes from the Latin word glaber, which means smooth or bald. It's that flat, usually hairless area between the arches.
Listener, tap your glabella. It's very distinct. And just below that, where the nose actually starts to dip in.
That is the nation. It is the root of the nose. It's the exact junction where the frontal bone meets the two tiny nasal bones. If you wear glasses, the bridge of your glasses usually sits right near the nation.
Okay, moving down to the eyes. The orbits. I always thought of eye sockets as round, like distinct circles, but the source material points out that they're actually quadrangular.
That's right. It's more of a rounded square or an old TV screen shape.
Yeah.
You have 4 distinct margins: superior, inferior, medial, and lateral. And the bone is heavily reinforced here. The rim of the orbit is thick.
Why is it so thick there?
Think about getting into a fight. If you get punched in the eye, the rim acts as a force distributor. It takes the impact so the eyeball itself doesn't burst. It's literally a roll cage for the eye.
And if you run your finger along the top rim of your eye socket, the supraorbital margin, you might feel a tiny little notch or even a hole.
I can feel mine. It's just a little indent about a third of the way out from the nose. That is the supraorbital notch. Sometimes it's a full hole, in which case it's called the foramen.
What's it for?
Wiring. It allows the supraorbital nerve and vessels to pass out of the eye socket and up onto your forehead. That is exactly why if you get hit there or if you press on it too hard with your thumb, it really hurts. You're compressing a bare nerve directly against the bone.
And there is a matching one on the bottom, right?
Yes, the infraorbital foramen. It's located about 1 centimeter below the bottom rim of the eye socket, resting on the maxilla bone. That's where the infraorbital nerve comes out.
I feel like I know this spot from the dentist.
You definitely do. If you've ever had a root canal on your upper front teeth, the dentist might inject anesthetic right near the infraorbital foramen to flood that nerve and numb the whole upper lip and cheek.
Okay, let's talk about the cheeks themselves. The zygomatic bones.
The zygomatic bones form the prominence of the cheek. They sit on the lower outer corner of the eye socket. They are essentially the armor for the side of the face.
They seem pretty sturdy.
They have to be. They take the absolute brunt of impacts in sports or falls, but they also act as an outrigger. They push the masseter muscles out to the side, giving your jaw much better leverage for chewing.
Moving inward from the cheeks, we have the nose, or at least the hole where the nose used to be.
Right. The classic skull look. Most of your nose is cartilage, which rots away after death, leaving that distinct pear-shaped opening called the anterior nasal aperture. But the top part, the hard bridge of your nose, is bone. Those are the 2 nasal bones.
And looking at the very bottom of that pear-shaped nose hole, there is a sharp little spike sticking out.
The anterior nasal spine. It sits right in the midline at the bottom of the nasal opening.
Listener, you can try to feel this one. Press your index finger firmly against your upper lip, right under the septum of your nose, and push up gently toward your nose. You might feel a hard, bony resistance.
That's the spine. It serves as the primary anchor point for the cartilage of your nasal septum. It keeps your nose centered on your face.
Okay, moving down to the business end of the face, the jaws.
The jaws. We have the upper jaw and the lower jaw. And anatomically speaking, they're very different creatures.
The upper jaw is maxilla.
Yes. And surprisingly, it is not one bone. It is actually 2 bones, the maxillae, fused right down the middle, right under your nose. The maxilla is really the keystone of the face.
Why do they call it a keystone?
Because it connects to almost everything else. It touches the frontal bone, the zygomatic bone, the nasal bone, the lacrimal bone. It ties the whole middle of the face together.
Yeah.
And it has these processes or extensions that reach out to grab other bones.
And the most important process for our daily life has to be the alveolar process.
Right. Alveolus means a small cavity or pit. The alveolar process is the curved, thick ridge of bone that holds the roots of your upper teeth.
No, is that bone just static, like concrete holding a post?
Not at all. It is highly dynamic, spongy bone. It responds constantly to pressure. When you chew, you are stimulating that bone to stay dense and strong. If you lose a tooth, the bone actually realizes it has no job to do anymore. It resorbs and physically shrinks.
Really?
Yes. That's why the face shape changes so drastically in elderly people who have lost all their teeth. The maxilla physically gets smaller and recedes.
That's fascinating. The bone needs the tooth just as much as the tooth needs the bone. Now let's talk about the heavy lifter, the lower jaw, the mandible.
The mandible. It is the only truly movable bone of the entire skull. It's shaped like a horseshoe, and it is incredibly dense. It has to be, to handle the extreme torque of chewing.
And it has some very distinct features mentioned in the text, the symphysis menti.
That is the vertical line right down the center of your chin. Symphysis means a growing together. When you are developing fetus, the mandible is two completely separate halves. They fuse together at the symphysis menti during the first year of life.
And the triangular bump at the bottom of the chin, the thing that makes a chin?
The mental protuberance. Mentum is Latin for chin. Here's a really fun fact for you. Humans are the only animals with a true projecting chin.
Wait, really? Even chimps don't have chins.
No. If you look at a chimp skull, or even a Neanderthal skull, the jaw slopes backward from the teeth. The projecting chin is a uniquely Homo sapiens trait. We aren't 100% sure why, but it might be related to managing the biomechanical stress on the jaw from our smaller teeth, or maybe even our speech patterns.
I see another hole listed here on the jaw, the mental foramen.
Yes. Listener, find your lower jaw. Move your finger back from your chin to about where your premolars are. Those are the teeth right between the pointy canine and the big molars in the back. About halfway down the height of the bone there is a hole called the mental foramen.
What comes out of there?
The mental nerve. It provides sensation to your lower lip and your chin. This is actually why if you rest your chin heavily on your hand for too long while studying or reading, your lip might start to tingle. You're physically compressing the mental nerve against the mental foramen.
And looking at the shape of the jaw, you have the horizontal part holding all the teeth, and then it turns a very sharp corner to go up towards the ear.
The horizontal part is called the body. The vertical part going up is the ramus. And that sharp corner where it turns, that is the angle of the mandible. That is the defining physical feature of a strong jawline. In males, this angle is often more square and flared out. In females, it's usually more obtuse and smooth.
All right, let's rotate the skull again. We've done the top, we've done the front. Now we're looking at the side profile, the normal lateralis.
This is a really complex view because you finally see how the brain case connects to the face. You see the skyline of the skull.
And that skyline is marked by the temporal lines.
Yes. If you put your fingers flat on your temple right now and clench your teeth really hard, go ahead and try it. Do you feel a muscle pop out?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It pulses.
That is the temporalis muscle. It is a huge, fan-shaped muscle that covers the whole side of your head. It attaches directly to these temporal lines. They start at the outer corner of the eye and arch all the way back across the parietal bone.
It's amazing to think that muscle is that massive. It covers half the side of the head.
It's a remarkably powerful engine for closing the jaw.
Now, dominating the side view is this bridge of bone, the zygomatic arch.
Our cheekbone arch,
Yes.
a horizontal bar. It's formed by two players reaching out to each other. The temporal bone sends a process forward, and the zygomatic bone sends a process backward. They meet right in the middle to form this flying buttress.
And the muscle we just talked about, the temporalis, passes underneath it.
Exactly. The temporalis muscle slides right under that arch like a thick cable sliding under a bridge.
Now, the source material highlights a very specific and frankly somewhat scary region here called the Pterion. P-T-E-R-I-O-N.
The Pterion. This is arguably the most clinically important point on the side of the skull.
Where is it exactly?
If you place two fingers on your temple, about 4 centimeters above the zygomatic arch, and a little bit back from the eye socket, you are resting right over the Pterion.
Visually, on a bare skull, it looks like a mess, right?
It really does. It looks like the letter H. It is a very messy suture junction where 4 different bones all meet at once. The frontal, the parietal, the temporal, and the sphenoid. It's a traffic jam of bones.
And why is it labeled the danger zone in the notes?
2 crucial reasons. First, structurally, the bone is very, very thin here. If you hold a skull up to the light, the Pterion is literally translucent. Second, and this is the real kicker, right underneath this paper-thin bone runs the anterior division of the middle meningeal artery.
An artery, right under the thinnest part of the outer shell.
Yes. It is a major design flaw, frankly. If you get hit in the temple with a baseball or a rock or a hockey puck, you can shatter the Pterion inward. The sharp bone shards can slice that artery wide open.
And that obviously causes bleeding inside the skull.
A very specific, highly dangerous type called an epidural hematoma. The blood pumps out under arterial pressure and literally peels the dura mater off the inside of the skull. The scary thing about it is the lucid interval.
The lucid interval.
You might get hit, get knocked out for a second, wake up, and feel totally fine. You think you're okay, but the blood is actively building up, silently compressing the brain. An hour later, you just collapse and die.
That is deeply sobering. It really highlights that the skull isn't perfect armor everywhere. It has real weak points.
It does. It's a constant biological trade-off. We desperately need space for those huge jaw muscles we just talked about, so the bone had to be thinner there to accommodate them. Evolution is always balancing costs and benefits.
Let's move back a bit to the temporal bone itself, around the ear. There is a lot of geography here.
The temporal bone is one of the most structurally complex bones in the body. First, you have the ear hole itself, the external acoustic meatus. That leads right down to your eardrum.
And then right behind the ear, there's that hard, downward pointing lump. Listener, reach behind your earlobe. You can't miss it.
The mastoid process. Mastoid means breast-like. It's a heavy, conical projection. That hard bump is actually surprisingly hollow inside. It's full of air cells, almost like a honeycomb.
What is it for?
It's a liver. It serves as a massive anchor point for the sternocleidomastoid muscle. That is the big, ropey muscle that runs from behind your ear all the way down to your collarbone. It's what lets you turn your head side to side and nod.
So the bigger the bump, the stronger the neck.
Generally speaking, yes. In males, the mastoid process is usually significantly larger and more rugged because of the heavier muscle mass they carry in their necks.
And then, hidden a bit deeper, is something called the styloid process.
The styloid. It looks exactly like a needle or a record stylus. It's a thin, long spike of bone pointing straight down from underneath the ear region. You can't really feel this one from the outside because it's buried deep in the soft tissue.
A sharp spike of bone pointing into the neck sounds dangerous.
It can be. It acts as an anchor for delicate muscles connecting to the tongue and the throat. But in some people, it actually grows too long. It's a condition called Eagle syndrome. It can grow so long it pokes the tonsils or compresses nerves in the neck, causing severe pain every time you swallow.
Anatomy gone wrong. So we have the heavy lump, the mastoid, and the sharp spike, the styloid. And then moving to the back of the side view, we have another suture junction called the asterion.
The asterion. It means star. It's where the parietal, occipital, and temporal bones all meet. It looks like a little star-shaped suture junction right behind the ear region. It's a very reliable landmark for neurosurgeons trying to navigate the back of the brain.
Okay, continuing our rotation, let's look at the back of the head now, the norma occipitalis.
This is the view you get if you're standing in line behind someone at the grocery store. You're seeing the posterior parts of the parietal bones and the wide squamous part of the occipital bone.
And the undisputed star of the show here is the bump on the back of the head.
The external occipital protuberance. It's a bit of a mouthful, so anatomists often just call the central point the inion.
Listener, reach around to the back of your skull right now, right in the center, just above where the soft neck muscles attach. Run your hand up the back of your neck until you hit hard bone. You should feel a distinct bump.
Some people have a very prominent hook there, others are more subtle. But that is the inion. It's the critical attachment point for the nuchal ligament. That's a thick, elastic band that runs down your neck to your vertebrae.
And extending out from that central bump to the sides are these curved ridges called nuchal lines.
Nuchal meaning neck. You have the superior nuchal lines curving out from the inion, and below them, the inferior nuchal lines. These ridges are essential for human posture.
Why is that?
Think about the pure physics of your head. It weighs about 10 to 11 pounds, basically like a bowling ball. And it's balanced right on top of a skinny stick, which is your spine. But the balance point isn't in the center. The head is very front-heavy because of the weight of the face and the jaw.
So it naturally wants to fall forward.
Exactly. If you've ever fallen asleep sitting up on a plane, you know your head drops forward. To keep your head up and your eyes level all day, your neck muscles have to constantly, continuously pull down on the back of the skull. They need highly rugged terrain to grip onto. That is what the nuchal lines are. They are grip tape for the heavy trapezius and splenius muscles.
It's amazing how much landscape there is on the skull that is purely defined by muscle attachment. We don't think about the bone responding to the muscle.
Absolutely. The bone actively remodels itself based on the pull of muscles. That's a concept called Wolff's Law. A weightlifter with a massive neck will have much more defined nuchal lines than someone who doesn't exercise.
Okay, we have reached the final view, and this is by far the most complex one. We are going to flip the skull over and look at it straight from underneath. The norma basalis.
The base of the skull. This view is basically nightmare fuel for anatomy students because there are just so many holes, jagged edges, and uneven surfaces. But structurally, it is the most brilliant part of the entire design.
To visualize this properly, you have to imagine the lower jaw, the mandible, has been completely removed. We are looking at the undercarriage of the cranium.
It's exactly like looking under the hood of a car. This is where all the plumbing and all the wiring enters and exits the chassis.
The source material divides this huge area into 3 zones: anterior, middle, and posterior. Let's take them one by one, nice and slow, because this is dense. The anterior part is basically just the roof of the mouth.
Correct. The hard palate. Listener, take your tongue and push it firmly against the roof of your mouth. You are feeling the norma basalis right now.
And looking at the bone, it's surrounded by that horseshoe of teeth again.
That's the alveolar arch we mentioned earlier. Inside that arch is the hard palate. It separates the oral cavity, the mouth, from the nasal cavity above it. It's what allows you to chew food and breathe air at the exact same time.
Which is a very handy feature for survival.
Very. And the palate isn't just one bone. The front 2/3 are formed by the palatine processes of the maxillae. The back 1/3 is formed by the horizontal plates of the palatine bones. If you look closely at a skull, you can actually see the sutures forming a perfect cross shape right on the roof of the mouth.
Moving back to the middle part, this is behind the teeth but before the big hole for the spinal cord. This looks like a chaotic landscape.
It is an incredibly busy area. Right in the midline, you have the vomer. It's a thin, plow-shaped bone that separates the left and right nasal passages at the very back. Vomer actually means plowshare in Latin.
And flanking the vomer, you have these weird little legs hanging straight down. They look like bat legs.
Those are the pterygoid processes. They belong to the sphenoid bone, which is this crazy bone shaped like a butterfly sitting deep inside the center of the skull. These processes hang down right behind your upper wisdom teeth. They have 2 plates, a medial plate and a lateral plate.
Pterygoid means wing-like, right?
Yes, but they aren't for flying. They are key attachment points for the pterygoid muscles. These are the deep muscles that let you grind your jaw side to side. So again, it all comes back to chewing mechanics.
And also right here in this middle section, we see the fusion of the sphenoid and the occipital bone.
Yes, the basilar part of the occipital bone. It's a thick, heavy bar of bone ascending toward the front. It creates a slope called the clivus for the brainstem to rest on inside the skull. It's quite literally like a slide for the brainstem.
Now let's get to the posterior part, the back of the base. And here sits the granddaddy of all foramina.
The foramen magnum, Latin for great hole.
Yeah.
It is massive. It sits right in the dead center of the occipital bone.
And this is the main gateway.
This is the primary connection between the brain and the rest of the body. The brainstem passes down through here and seamlessly becomes the spinal cord. Also, the vertebral arteries swim up through here to supply blood to the back of the brain.
And guarding the sides of this big hole are 2 smooth oval bumps. They almost look like kidney beans.
Those are the occipital condyles. They look like the rockers on a rocking chair. These sit directly on top of your first neck vertebra, the atlas.
And because they are curved rockers, they allow us to do a very specific motion.
They allow the nodding motion. When you nod your head to say yes, your entire skull is physically rocking back and forth on these 2 occipital condyles.
There are a few other critical holes back here. Just above the condyles, there's a tunnel called the hypoglossal canal.
The hypoglossal canal, this is the dedicated tunnel for the hypoglossal nerve, which is the 12th cranial nerve. That nerve controls all your tongue muscles.
So, my ability to articulate speech, to swallow, to lick a stamp, it all entirely depends on that nerve getting safely through this one little tunnel.
Absolutely. If that canal is compressed by a tumor or fractured in a trauma, your tongue becomes paralyzed on that side.
And then between the temporal bone and the occipital bone, there is a large, very irregular opening, the jugular foramen.
This is a really busy intersection. The jugular vein, which is the main drain pipe for all the brain's used blood, starts right here. The blood drains out of the skull through this specific hole. But it's not just a drain. 3 separate cranial nerves also squeeze through here alongside the vein.
Which ones?
The glossopharyngeal, for taste and swallowing, the vagus, which famously controls your heart rate and digestion, and the accessory nerve, which controls your upper neck muscles. They all share this one critical exit ramp.
So talk about a serious bottleneck. And one more I want to spot check before we wrap this view. The stylomastoid foramen.
Located right exactly between the sharp styloid process and the heavy mastoid process. This is the sole exit for the facial nerve. This nerve controls all the muscles of facial expression.
So smiling, frowning, raising eyebrows.
Every single one of them. The nerve comes out of this tiny hole and spreads out across your face. This is exactly why Bell's palsy happens. If the nerve gets even slightly inflamed inside this tiny, unyielding, bony tunnel, it gets compressed. It shuts down. Suddenly, half your face is paralyzed. You can't close your eye. You can't smile. It really shows how deeply dependent our soft biology is on this hard architecture.
It is absolutely incredible. You look at the bottom of the skull, and at first glance, it just looks like a chaotic moonscape of jagged rock. But when you zoom in, every single divot, every hole, every ridge is a precisely drilled channel for a specific wire or pipe.
It is high-density engineering at its finest. There is absolutely no wasted space. It is perfectly optimized for space, for protection, and for leverage.
So we have fully built the skull today. We've seen the vaulted ceiling of the neurocranium, the complex sensory housing of the viscerocranium. We've traced the sutures, tapped the forehead, clenched the jaw, and thoroughly inspected the plumbing underneath.
We have successfully constructed the fortress.
What is the big takeaway here when you step back and look at the whole thing sitting on the table in that Frankfurt plane?
For me, it is always the balance between protection and weight. The skull needs to be strong enough to stop a lethal blow, but light enough to actually carry around on your neck all day without fatiguing.
It's not just a solid block of concrete.
No. If it were completely solid bone, your head would weigh 30 pounds and you'd snap your own neck. It uses architectural tricks, arches, like the zygomatic arch, pillars, like the thick bone around the nose and jaw, and flying buttresses to direct force away from the delicate areas. And it varies the thickness incredibly intelligently.
That is a great point. We talked about the pterion on the side being paper thin, but the occipital bone at the back is thick.
Exactly. The back of the head is very thick because historically you might get clubbed from behind or fall backward. The forehead is double-walled with the frontal sinuses in between to absorb impact exactly like a crumple zone on a car bumper. But the temple is thin because it's safely covered by that thick temporalis muscle. It really highlights how our anatomy balances heavy-duty armor with lightweight, efficient engineering.
It really changes how you see people. You know, you're not just looking at faces anymore. You're looking at the underlying architecture. You see the keystone of the maxilla, the heavy anchor of the mastoid, the zipper of the sutures.
I strongly encourage everyone listening, next time you are bored or just sitting on the bus, explore your own skull. Feel the inion at the back. Trace the sharp angle of your jawline. Find that mastoid process. It connects you to your own biology in a very real, tangible way.
A biological puzzle box indeed. Thank you for taking us on this incredibly detailed tour.
My pleasure entirely.
And before we go, consider this. The skull doesn't just protect the brain, it actually shapes it. The inner surface of the cranial vault isn't perfectly smooth. It has ridges and valleys that exactly mirror the folds of your brain, locking it in place so it doesn't rotate when you turn your head. Your brain literally leaves its footprint on the bone. Something to think about the next time you tap your head. Thank you for listening to this deep dive into the architecture of the skull. Keep exploring, stay curious, and we will catch you in the next one.